Things get better when people take responsibility. You only get tomorrow one time. Do you want to spend it with us or not? Because we're going over here and this is how we do things around here. And if you've got a boss that's a bully, if you've got a boss that is pushing you to do things you don't want to do, don't give that boss your day tomorrow. They didn't deserve it.
Okay, let's just start. Welcome to a new episode of the Bridging Podcast.
Tomorrow is going to happen whatever we do. Is it better to go into tomorrow trusting a voice, a practice, process, a way forward? Or is it better to go into tomorrow filled with fear and not believing the things that have gotten you here so far?
Create a new reality. I close my eyes and I will be there. I will dream it. Welcome, Seth, on the Bridging Podcast for the second time. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, we must have done something right last time because here I am again.
It's an honor. So your newest book, The Song of Significance, Leading Together, will be published in May, very soon. And I'm going to start with my first question about it. How do you define good leadership?
So leadership is not the same as management, and we're so confused about the two. Management is getting other people to do what you want because you have power, because you have authority, because it's important to you. And so the very question of how do I become a leader is usually, how do I become a manager? How do I get people to do what I want? I think being a leader is creating the conditions for other people to do what they want. That when we turn on the lights and open the door for leadership, what we're saying to people is, we're going over there. Do you want to come with us? Not, I am insisting you go over there because there's prizes or punishment if you don't.
Yeah. So creating good conditions for people to do what they want to do and so they can contribute.
Correct.
Okay. So, Viktor Frankl, he said, he's the founder of logotherapy, the writer of this beautiful book, Man's Search for Meaning. He said, the problem with the United States is not having a Statue of Liberty, but not having a statue of responsibility. And in the Nordic Business Forum a few years ago in Stockholm, you say, this is the reason why people have troubles stopping being managers and starting to do leadership. So can you please explain this, and how does responsibility have to do with being a good leader? What is the connection there?
So a long time ago, my friends Alan and Bill had a conference, and at 5 o'clock in the morning, they woke us up to go fly fishing. And I took the lesson, but I insisted that they don't put a hook on my line. So everybody else was busy getting the fish on the hook, and I was just having fun because I wasn't trying to catch the fish. The thing is, if you're a fish, being on the hook is not a good thing to be. It's one step before the frying pan. And what we've brainwashed people into believing is that being on the hook is risky, that you don't want to be responsible. Because if you can just whine and complain and point fingers, you are not responsible. And so Frankl's statue of responsibility would basically be able to say, I did this. I am responsible. I am on the hook. And when we sign up to be a leader, we are at some level taking responsibility for what happens after that. And what we learn in school is that that's not helpful. That what we learn in school is don't get called on, don't get noticed, just get through the day. But the problem is that leads to a really empty life, and it doesn't help us make things better. Things get better when people take responsibility.
So, and if the leaders take responsibility, then there will be an environment created for people to do work that matters.
Well, because leadership is contagious. Management is not. Management is on the manager, you are the worker. Leadership says, if we care about this, then we can all become leaders. We can all take responsibility. Responsibility shared is multiplied, not divided. And when a lot of people take responsibility for forward motion, things get better. That is what we seek in our modern world. The way we're going to make things better is by people showing up to create the conditions for other people to also take responsibility.
I love that leadership is contagious. I really love that. So what is the system's problem at this moment of time, that we don't have many leaders, but managers? I mean, we know we want to have leaders. I want to have a leader. But what is the system's problem at this moment?
So where did the system come from? The system came mostly from 1909 on, when we figured out that we could pump oil out of the ground really cheap and make energy. And then we also figured out that we could take machines and use them to increase productivity. And the combination of cheap energy and high productivity is really seductive, because it means we can make a lot of stuff for cheap. It means we can make things convenient. It means we can make a profit. And so we built our entire culture around this idea. Will this be on the test? Do what you're told. Listen to the boss. Try to avoid responsibility. And it worked. There are more people with more money on the earth right now than at any time in history. The problem with it is it inevitably leads to a race to the bottom. It leads to dehumanization. It leads to division. It leads to bullying. It leads to all of the things we're wrestling with right now. And so what I'm arguing for in the Song of Significance is that we take a deep breath and realize we don't need more stuff. We need more life, more humanity.
We don't need more stuff, but we need life. We need more humanity. I love that so much. I love it. So about significance, why do we need significance in a job we do? Why do we need it?
Well, I'm not sure we need it. Plenty of people live their whole life without it. But if you're going to go to work for 40 or 50 or 60 hours a week for 40 or 50 or 60 years in a row, you're going to spend more time at work than you are with your family, more time at work than doing anything except maybe sleeping. And what a waste to do all of that to make your manager happy. If it is possible to have a roof over your head and enough to eat to take care of your family without doing that, I think that many of us would like that. We would like to have the best job we ever had. We'd like to know that we exceeded our own expectations for ourselves, that we made a difference in the world. And so if we have a glimpse of that, I think that many of us want more of it.
Yeah. So, instead of going through your day, make my manager happy or the person I'm report to, make your day a joyful day where you really contribute. And when would then be the right time, Seth, to speak up if it doesn't work for you that way? Like, actually, when is the right way to speak up? But also, why are we so I can't say it even though relentlessly attached to the idea of we need to be safe, don't speak up, don't be vulnerable there, because, you might get rejected, you might be fired, or whatever it might all. They might think about, who is she? Why does she come with this idea? And everyone is following. She doesn't follow this.
Yeah. Well, you, as always, have put your finger right on the key point. And if you show up in an industrial setting and insist on speaking up and trying to change it, it probably will not go well, because the system is very good at maintaining the system. So the first choice we make is, where are we going to even show up, right? If you show up at Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley and say, I am here to argue against making a lot of money, it's not going to work very well, because everybody else who's there is there for a different reason. So where we choose to show up is part of it. And then the second part of it is to figure out which constituents we can work with to help them understand we can get more of what we all want by bringing more humanity to the table, not by racing to the bottom. So, if we think about, my friend Danny Meyer started a chain of restaurants called Shake Shack. And Shake Shack is the opposite of McDonald's in many ways. Shake Shack costs more than McDonald's. Shake Shack, people say, is more delicious than McDonald's. It's less convenient than McDonald's. They don't have a drive-through window. You have to wait in line. And yet, by every measure that seems to matter, Shake Shack does better than McDonald's. So you can choose to show up in the world and say, I want to do something with some scale. I want to do something that makes a profit. But we're not going to do it by out discounting our competition. We're going to do it by bringing humans into what we do. And so we all have favorite companies, favorite brands, favorite organizations that have done this. And so the argument I'm making is that it is possible to transition to this other way of being in the world. In fact, it's urgent that we do so. But if you are simply, not just, but simply an employee, and you show up in a system that insists on measuring your every keystroke, your argument's probably not going to work very well.
So you need to choose deliberately, where am I choosing to show up?
Yes.
Which setting? So, and then looking at the organizations and companies, how can they be organized in a way that employees can experience significance, but also that the whole company experiences magic created by humans?
Yeah. So I think I'm a big fan, as you know, of being intentional, saying out loud, who's it for? What's it for? Where are we going? What are the expectations? If we hire people through a method that says we're looking for people who have easy to measure skills, who work cheap, that's what we're going to get. If we create an environment where I don't trust you and you don't trust me, that's where we're going to get. The alternative is to, with intent, say, this is what I expect from you, and this is what you should expect from me. This is how we're going to interact with each other. These are what meetings are going to be like. This is how we're going to tell each other the truth about what we're doing and how we do it. If you can announce those things up front, now you can start going down the path. If you announce those things and they're not true, it's not going to work very well. And so just as I wrote about in permission marketing, just as I wrote about in This Is Marketing, just as I wrote about in the practice, doing these things with intent out loud together is the first step.
Doing these things together out loud with intent is the first step. I want to just repeat that. Okay. And Seth, what makes the best job ever? How could we create the best job someone ever had? And that they feel like these conditions, whatever I do, I love it. They don't even think about what they earn, what time they leave. No, they are just like, I'm here, bring it on. I love it.
So I asked 10,000 people in 100 countries that question, and I gave them 14 different choices, including I got paid a lot. I didn't have to work very hard. But far and away, people answered two things. I achieved more than I thought I could. People treated me with respect. Those are the two things that people care about. And that's about creating the conditions. Companies don't understand this. They think that if they increase paid time off or give people free snacks, it will become a better job. No, what people want around the world is the same. They want to be successful humans. They want to show up and grow, and they want to be seen as the people they are, not as cogs in a machine. And yet, the organizations we build don't do those things.
Yeah. So you also wrote something about get to versus have to. Like get to expresses opportunities. Like I get to have the opportunity to teach this class when the other teacher had a burnout, instead of like I have to teach this class. Oh my God, you know. How do we come to a point that we feel I get to do this? And even though it takes me 15 hours a day, 1 year, full-time, 7 days a week, actually what you did with the Carbon Almanac, how do we get to this point? Also as ourselves, not only as the leaders or as we as a leader, but how do we do that?
So everyone who's listening to this probably has a job where they have a fair amount of autonomy, and where they probably work indoors, and where they probably aren't risking their life at work. Which means that compared to your great-grandparents, you have the best job ever. And yet, it might feel like a horrible, brain-numbing grind. It might be the kind of thing you have to do. Whereas if you had offered it to them 100 years ago, 200 years ago, they would have jumped at the chance to get to do what you do. So it's relative. Once we don't have somebody hitting us, once we are not in unsafe conditions, it's relative. It's a choice. We get to decide. Are we going to go to work today with a have-to mindset or a get-to mindset? And if we shift our mindset to I get to do this today, we will find the threads that move us forward. So I've had our conversation on our calendar for weeks, and I've been looking forward to this. I get to talk to you today. If I have to do 40 podcasts in one day, by the time I get to the 30th one, it's going to be, I have to do another one. That's a choice. And what I have tried to do in my super privileged, fortunate journey through all of this is resort to get to thinking instead of have to every chance I have.
You know, I have a very close friend and I'm running with him, and he's a runner for a longer time than me. And I am like, oh, Jay, I reached this. You know, I got now 16K. He said, like, what about thinking about, I got the opportunity today to run 16K. While you were up to running 21, for example, I got the opportunity today. And each time when I go with that, you know, it's a different feeling. And I know I can decide to say, oh my God, I need to go there, or this is the opportunity. And it makes me also a happier person, more joyful.
Yes, exactly.
So one question about enrollment and coercion in the work field or any field, that we are together and working with other people. Either it's a volunteer project or a company, or I don't know, the community in the neighborhood where you live. Why is enrollment more powerful than coercion? And how do we create an environment where there is enrollment?
So sooner or later, all motivation is self-motivation. That external forces can bully us, can push us, can reward us, but they only work if we internalize what is going on and motivate ourselves forward. So what coercion is a regularly maintained regime of external forces that push us to do something we might not want to do. The minute coercion ceases, unless we've embraced it and been brainwashed, it stops working. Enrollment is self-motivation. Enrollment is, I have signed up to go here. I have signed up to do this, to make this change happen. So an organization that is filled with people who are enrolled in the journey will always outperform one that is coercing people to go on the journey. So back to where we started, which is the job of the leader is to create the conditions for enrollment. That if you can figure out how to do work that is compelling enough that people, not all people, just enough people want to come with you, then the job of building the institution gets much easier.
So you also write in the Song of Significance, Leading Together, that hiring someone is not dating. If it's not dating, what is it then?
So I've been fortunate enough to never have been on an online dating site. But from what I hear, it's pretty superficial.
For sure. I can tell you that. I've been on it. It's so superficial. And each time we go back, I'm like, no. And then, it's so superficial. And I never had a nice date. I can tell you that very openly.
And so what's happening is we are resorting, when we are hiring people, to a very similar thing. We're going to look at 5 lines on a piece of paper, and then we're going to talk to you and see if you're good at talking to us, if you're good at being interviewed. But your job isn't being interviewed. So why are we seeing if you're good at being interviewed? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. What we're actually doing is saying we're all prisoners in the same coercion system, And I'd like to spend time with people I want to spend time with. That feels a lot like dating at some level. When in fact, what we want to do is surround ourselves with people who are enrolled in the journey and who have the real skills necessary for us to go together. Whether they're good at being interviewed or not is completely irrelevant. And what we have instead is the chance to, now that it's so easy to do things remotely, give them a work project and see what happens. Pay them for it. Because if you can do the work and you want to do the work, you're the kind of person we want to work with, not that you're clever or easy to talk to on a Zoom call. And yet, so much of what we see on LinkedIn or in job interviews feels a lot to me like dating.
Yeah. Actually also it feels for me also a lot like standardized tests. Like, there are some set of skills like tick, 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 tick. And I'm not talking about the real soft skills, but the hard skills. We need this, this, this. We will get there very soon. We will talk about the education system. But about the human-centered, human-centered companies, that we are actually hiring human with real skills that want to be enrolled. And going back to Viktor Frankl for one moment, how about, I was thinking, having a statue of a heart in any organization or a company? Like, I'm not talking about the real statue, but how do we build people-centric organizations? What could be a systemic change there?
Well, you tend to get what you measure, and you tend to get what you reward. And if we're going to measure and reward butts and seats and the duplicity of tricking people into paying more than they should or working harder than they might, then that's what we're going to get. And when we can create this environment of mutual expectation and enrollment, the rest of it can follow. That we have organizations in our lives that are like that. But we have to embrace turnover. We have to be able to say to somebody, you're not going where we're going anymore. Let's not go together. What's the point? And it used to be that if you lost your job in the culture of the 1950s or 60s, it was a black mark and it took a long time to replace it. But in a world filled with gigs, maybe not so much. So you only get tomorrow one time. Do you want to spend it with us or not? Because we're going over here and this is how we do things around here. And if you've got a boss that's a bully, if you've got a boss that is pushing you to do things you don't want to do, don't give that boss your day tomorrow. They didn't deserve it.
Does it also mean like at that moment, actually, we can show up more as a human instead of as a pawn in any organization we work for?
We can, if we are willing to take responsibility. That there is nothing in my manifesto that says that people are entitled to be prima donnas or jerks. That what I'm saying is, if you have actual contributions to make and you are willing to be responsible for them, you now have agency. And if you have agency, you can take responsibility. And if you can take responsibility and bring the right skills to the table, you will never need to worry about getting a job. That if you go first with those things, the jobs will follow. What we train people to do is to get a job and then ask what needs to be done, instead of saying, here's what I'm able to do. Who needs it?
Yeah. So for the long term, Seth, what is a giant, persistent and consistent threat to employers as well as employees if we don't lead with significance?
Well, we've been playing with GPT-3. I bet you have as well. And what it means is that artificial intelligence can now replace many mediocre contributions that humans used to make. If I need a pretty good book cover, I can just ask DALL-E and it'll draw one for me. If I need a press release, I can get a pretty good one for free in 3 seconds. And so the problem with doing mediocre work at scale is computers are going to do it. That only leaves extraordinary work, maybe not at scale, that's worth paying for. So the giant threat is, if you think about here in the US, there's a device called an Instant Pot, which is like a pressure cooker, slow cooker thing. You can buy it on Amazon for $89. It's a miracle. It's a magnificent device. And this is a company that didn't exist a few years ago, and now it has 100 knockoffs. Because once someone figures out how to make something that's pretty cool, we can get it copied in no time flat. We're going to have computers that are writing books and computers that are composing songs, and all of this is a race to the bottom. And so what I'm arguing about is, A, as people who have a limited time on this earth, why don't we do something that's significant? Why waste it doing something other than that? And number two, if you seek to make a living, you're probably not going to be able to do it by being the cheapest or the most convenient. The only way to do it going forward is to matter. And I think that's a choice.
Yeah. So, you wrote, I don't know in which book it was, but you wrote somewhere that capitalism can be the answer of a problem because capitalism is the single best method ever invented to solve market problems. So, and I am thinking about if we will make this a market problem, it will be solved by the market. You said too, can we make leading with significance a market problem? And if yes, how do we do that and how do we get it solved by the market so we lead with significance?
Right. So I've written a couple of things about this. I don't think the purpose of culture is to enable capitalism. I think the purpose of capitalism is to enable our culture. So as a community, we have to make rules to make sure that capitalism doesn't get out of hand and hurt people. And we've done that over and over again, right? Like slavery is against the law for good reason. But capitalism run amok is industrial capitalism, which doesn't like the market. Industrial capitalism wants to be a monopoly. Industrial capitalism wants to be completely in charge. But market capitalism says, if you can find a market problem and solve it, you can make a living. And my argument in Song of Significance is, even if you don't buy the human part of what I'm saying, the fact is clear that there is a market problem. Consumers want to buy things from humans, and talented humans want to work at places that treat them like humans. So both sides of the equation benefit if you can solve the problem as you build your organization. If you can build a place that's human, like who actually wants to go work at Twitter? What kind of talented person is going to go work under that regime? It's hard for me to imagine anybody who would do that compared to being able to go to a place like Microsoft, which is embracing the idea that smart programmers, people who understand computers, are welcome, and they're not going to measure your keystrokes because that doesn't measure the value you create. Well, if I'm right, then Microsoft is going to attract more enrollment and more skill, and they're going to outperform organizations that are busy measuring keystrokes and racing to the bottom. Once again, we've created a marketplace where people who show up with enrollment are treated better, and organizations that do it perform better.
Yeah. Wow, that's a lot. That's really a lot, Seth. So I actually want to talk for a moment about the project you did last year with 300 plus volunteers in over 90 plus countries for the Carbon Almanac book. So you have spent 1 year full time, daily 15 hours, 7 days a week, together with these amazing people. And you aligned on a mission and made change happen. You were all leading with significance. What happened to you, your colleagues, your friends that worked very hard on this, like talking about leading with significance? What is like the journey and the outcome there? What kind of results do you get back in being a human?
It's a beautiful question. Thank you. It changed us. It changed all of us in different ways. And I'll start with the bad news first. The bad news is when you take it personally, then whenever it goes into the world, you take that personally as well. That we put so much heart and soul into it, that we wanted every single person who saw it, who touched it, to take away what we put into it. And when you care that much, you're in for a roller coaster. But what really happened was people discovered they had agency. They discovered they could be heard. They discovered that page 19 thinking opened the door for them to do more than they thought they could do. They discovered that they didn't have to waste time in meetings because someone with power insisted that they show up. They saw what was possible. And that was true for me too. I mean, I've done hundreds, more than 100 books. And this one is one I will never forget, because it's different when you're singing, dancing, hugging with all these people around the world in sync, who you have never met in person and might never meet in person, because being on that journey together is what humans are organized to do. It's who we really are as people. And it's something that we're deprived of too often.
I hope we will get that more in the work field, either online or offline, that feeling that we will all have, like, hey, we contributed here and we were together doing this. So I want to go for a moment to our education system. So, I'm a part-time teacher now, but I was teaching for a long time, full-time, at primary school, 9, 10, 11 years old. And all what is happening right now in the work field, I mean, it also started somewhere, and I believe it started definitely in the education system. Back when I was at school in the 90s, there was an education system thought in the 18th century, early 19th century, about we go to school, we get standardized tests, get grades, go to any college, maybe famous college in the States, and start working for a company, get into these meetings, maybe unnecessary meetings. And maybe one day, we might be in charge and leads. So we don't really educate people on solving interesting problems, on to lead, no matter the age or experience. Why don't we do that? Why that doesn't the schooling system? I wouldn't really say education, even though I am part of it. And how should we educate children at school to solve interesting problems?
It means so much to me that you have spent the time and really gone deep into my work, and that you're a teacher and that you care so much. So thank you, Özlem. We had a problem 150 years ago, which is that factories were heating up and we didn't have enough workers to go into the factories to do what they were told, because it wasn't natural to go from being on a farm where you determined what you did all day to going to a dark building before electricity and being told what to do. The Prussians had a system of paramilitary schooling that taught kids to do what they were told. And we copied that system wholesale and turned it into public schools, at least in my country. I can't speak for where you live. And it works at scale. That's the magic of it. And, De La Salle, who ended up becoming a saint in France, did the same thing. Give people points, take points away, have folks sit in straight rows, give them tests, make sure people raise their hand, even if they have to do something like go to the bathroom. Don't let anybody make their own choices. This is now worldwide. We did it because it's so efficient if you want to train people to do what they're told. And if the world had stayed the same, it would have been perfect, because the world stays the same. You know what to tell people to do. And you need people who will do what they are told. The problem is the world is changing. And, it's interesting. In the Song of Significance, I talk about Plato, who gets a lot of credit from philosophers. But Plato said, don't let children play new games. Make sure they're playing exactly the same structured games as everyone ever before them. Because if they play new games, if they explore new things,
that's what we want. I want to.
It's correct. Plato was wrong. And again, what we have is a world that is changing largely because of technology. And we don't know what to do in the face of change. And I know that when I write a blog post about things changing, I inevitably hear from people who are angry at me because they say I should argue for things to stay the same. And the reason they say that is because they've been brainwashed into thinking that that's safer. It's not safer. It's just the way it was.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. I'm really amazed by this. I'm really, really amazed. I'm also curious about this. If we have caused this problem, it wasn't caused by a few people. You wrote actually, if we have built an enormous system about how education should be with all standardized tests, what are a systemic set of solutions to change our education system and make people lead with significance right now?
So what kind of person becomes a teacher, right? I don't think it's somebody who wants a command and control system in place. I think they want to educate folks. I think they want to create the conditions for kids to become better than they were yesterday. So the whole idea of curriculum and tests and homework, and it's all built around compliance. What teachers are capable of doing is actually teaching if we just get out of the way and let them do it. If we can create a classroom where kids look at each other, work with each other, coordinate with each other, build something, solve interesting problems, kids can do this. I have been an informal teacher since 1977, and I have seen what happens if you give the kid the confidence to do what they hope that they will be able to do. And so I'm pro-teacher. I'm anti-bureaucrat. And I think what we need to figure out how to do is get enrollment from parents, from teachers, and from kids to say, this class, we're going over there. And if you don't want to go over there, don't come. In the US, there's something called the Thayer method of learning, which is every student is responsible for their own preparation. We're not going to give you a test to see whether you did the reading. Don't come to class if you didn't do the reading. If you don't want to go forward, don't go forward. At the Acton Academy, a classroom has 150 people in it and only 2 adults. And the 7-year-olds teach the 5-year-olds, and the 9-year-olds teach the 6-year-olds. And everyone does projects all day long. And the kids who leave those facilities are better prepared for the world we live in now than the kids who got straight A's at Horace Mann. Because we have to take a deep breath and say, we have failed in preparing people to be humans.
Yeah. So, I got the opportunity to teach at different schools, international, British, Dutch school abroad, and now I'm at a Dutch school. Different system, Dalton, Montessori, all these different. And, I ask kids always the question at the end, like, hey, what was your favorite moment during the classes or during the days we had? And none of them says like, the math class, page 80. Or grammar, whatever, literacy, whatever. But they say, for example, the Kahoot, because we play a lot of Kahoot, where a lot of knowledge is involved. Or like when we did math with dancing, or when we were together, like coaching each other. Honestly, I come also from very far away because I was taught at the education university to teach a certain way. You sit straight, you raise your hand, you do this, and I had to also figure it out how it would be different. But none of the students, maybe I had, I don't know, maybe 10,000 in the past 16 years, none of them said, that literacy class, that science class, it was all about something around that, like the story about it, for example. Okay, I'm just curious to this. You had a conversation with Rich Roll. He published it last week. And he says there to you, like, hey, you have a lot of expertise. And I found this really surprising. Actually, not really, but okay. Anyhow, you said, I don't have much expertise, but I'm good at asking questions about the way things work. So how do we ask good questions, and how do we teach children to ask good questions?
Kids know how to ask good questions, and then we spend several years before they get to school insisting that they don't ask them. And by the time they get to school, they associate asking good questions with getting in trouble. And we have to undo that. I think we have to undo it in the school, and then it will get undone at home. But the question that I would ask is, are we rewarding kids for having the right answer, or are we rewarding them for asking good questions? The obvious answer is what's on the test. And so if we started testing where the right answers were questions, then I think we'd hear a lot more questions. And so the interactions that we have, when I teach people how to paddle a canoe, one of the first things I say is, all right, watch this. I just pulled the water back. Where'd the water go? And we have a 5-minute conversation about where the water went when you pull the paddle. And the answers that people come up with are all wrong for the first couple minutes, and then we figure it out. And once they discover that they can figure out an answer, challenge a conventional wisdom, it's really hard to stop them. Now they're on their way.
Yeah.
And so we can unlock this in kids if we just had the guts to let them ask questions. Instead, what we do is we say, any questions? No one raises their hand, and we move on. Yeah. Well, that's a failure of education. That's not a failure of the students.
Yeah. I can say, what works sometimes is just ask me the question. I don't know if I have the answer, because also don't trust me. I also teach what I have learned, but it might be not right. 10 years later, we will figure out that's not right. So there are no stupid questions. There are just questions. Just ask, just shoot. Anyhow, I want to ask something about real skills. If you would be the Minister of Education of the world, let's pretend for a moment, and if you could create an encyclopedia, I swear to God, I just practiced this word. Encyclopedia. It's in Dutch, encyclopedie. So encyclopedia with real skills, like in the term soft skills it's called, but the real skills, how would that look like?
But what I try to do when I argue the semantics of real skills versus soft skills is this. In an industrial society, soft skills don't seem to matter very much. And if we can measure it easily, like typing speed or whether or not you know how to program bug-free code in C++, those are important. Those we pay money for to go to school to get certified in. But if it's a soft skill, like honesty, loyalty, connection, empathy, charisma, insight, the ability to ask good questions, these are all the things that I so admire in you. All of a sudden, those don't seem to matter very much because they're hard to measure. Well, let's call them real skills instead and say, we can figure out how to tell the difference between someone who has them and someone who doesn't. And we can figure out how to create the environment where someone can learn to do them more. Clearly, you can learn to be slightly better at telling a story. You can learn to be slightly better at telling the truth. You can learn to be slightly better at asking a question. Well, if you can learn to be slightly better at it, you can do it again and again and again and again and again and get really good at it. And it's absurd to say that these don't have value. So if we think about the former CEO of Microsoft, Steve Ballmer, perhaps the worst performing CEO of my lifetime. Steve Ballmer knew how to do things that were easy to measure. He was terrible at making basic decisions involving strategy and humanity. And as a result, Microsoft missed the smartphone, the search engine, social networks, and cloud computing. 4 of the biggest trends of the entire decade, the biggest decade in tech, missed 4 times by somebody who was missing soft skills, real skills. But we can teach people these things, even though we can't test for them, not yet. And so what I want to encourage parents and teachers and bosses to do is to say, I can teach you hard skills. I can teach you how to code in C++ if you are enrolled in the journey of developing your real skills.
If you're involved in the journey of developing real skills, I can teach you any soft skill.
Any hard skill. Yeah.
Any hard skill. I'm sorry. Any hard skill. Okay. So the time is almost gone, but I want to ask just one more question. Really, Seth, this is amazing. I'm just trying to find where. Oh yeah, here it is. You said, if failure is the key component of pathfinding, getting lost is the way to get found. No is no for now. Because not we are going to hassle and we are going to get a yes, no, because we learn one more thing that didn't work on our way to do something that does work. How do we bring this over in an environment where we work with others as a leader, as a teacher? How do we do that?
That's a great question. Let's talk about getting lost, and then we'll talk about the no. If you are in the woods or someplace where you are lost, the way out is to productively find alternative paths. It is not to slam your head into a tree, because clearly slamming your head into a tree doesn't help you or the tree. It's instead to say, what is the most likely way forward here? What can I learn from that? And the mistake people make when we talk about no is they think that they get points for the selfish hustle, that they get points for propositioning people at a bar, that they get points for constantly hassling people because, oh, I got to know. Yeah, but it wasn't in the service of generosity. You weren't showing up trying to solve somebody else's problem. If we show up to solve somebody else's problem and we get a no, what we just learned is it didn't solve their problem. But we can get better at trying to solve their problem. And if we get better at solving the problem for others, that is at the heart of market capitalism. Find problems and solve them. But it has to be done in the spirit of generosity, not what's in it for you, but being enrolled in the journey of doing it for them. And that is a reliable, human, community-focused way to create value.
Okay. My last question, Seth. So in your conversation again with Rich Roll, you said that you went to visit your friends in Sacramento.
San Clemente, yes. It's 2 words. Yes.
That place. And you woke up at 6 a.m. to go for a swim and you almost drowned. And you were trying to get back on the shore. And that moment, you were the best version of yourself. I mean, you were almost dying, right? You just swim and you just are the best. Do we need to almost drown to be the best version of ourselves? And how do we live a life that we are just proud of ourselves, that we are the best version of ourselves?
Wow. I think that we can become the best version of ourselves without nearly dying. But I think sometimes nearly dying helps us wake up. And so many of us are really, really fortunate. You know, I survived COVID. I have a healthy family. I am really lucky in the life that I've been able to build. But even then, it's easy to fall asleep and to get into the rhythm and to feel like you've achieved whatever it is you've achieved. And waking up is important. And the thing is that 20 years from now, 40 years from now, our grandchildren are going to say, what did you do when the climate was at its key moment? What did you do when AI showed up? What did you do with all of the opportunities that were right in front of you? And the reason that I'm doing my work is because I want to help people wake up. I want to help me wake up. I do a lot of my writing for me to remind myself of, in this moment with so much privilege, I can't sleepwalk through it. It's worth it. And if it's not, then just let the ocean win. But I have work to do, and so do you. And the chance to talk to you about this is thrilling because there are people who trust you, who listen to you, who are on the journey with you. And you are showing up regularly to wake people up. And we need to do it. We need to hurry.
Thank you so much, Seth. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. This was amazing. Thank you for your time. Really, I just want to give you a hug. I'll just give it. Thank you.